South America, 1909. According to this famous film, a gun battle claims the life of Butch Cassidy. If the film version is right, who was the mysterious stranger who appeared on a Wyoming road 15 years later? A mysterious stranger who bore a strong resemblance to Butch Cassidy. Much has been recorded of the life of Butch Cassidy, how he rode the outlaw trail with the notorious Wild Bunch. But mystery still surrounds his death. Now, those who have kept their silence for years are ready to reveal the true ending to this remarkable story.
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanation, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
The vast panorama of the American West has always bred large legends. Tall tales abound of outlaws and lawmen who rode into history across the open landscape. Among them, Billy the Kid, Pat Garrett, Cherokee Bill, John Wesley Hardin, Wyatt Earp, and Blackjack Ketchum. Time and distance have clouded the truth, but one thing is certain. Few on either side of the law would venture here unless they knew the country well or had good reason to hide. It is August 13th, 1897. Bank robbery is not an unusual occurrence here. But these are no ordinary bank robbers. Known for their speed and daring, they're called the Wild Bunch. Leading them is Butch Cassidy. He has herded cattle here and knows every canyon and mesa. For Butch, it was a short step from rounding up strays to rustling and then to robbing. A stretch in jail for a minor offense has settled the direction his life will take. A life he will one day admit was wasted and hurtful to those he loved the most. Butch becomes master of the fast getaway. Relays of horses have been staked out before the job. On fresh mounts, the Wild Bunch can outdistance any posse. In this way, they have robbed bank after bank over a wide area of the West. Montpelier, Idaho, Winnemucca, Nevada, Telluride, and Denver, Colorado. $16,000, $17,000, $21,000, $30,000. The separate hauls added up to more than $200,000. By morning, the outlaws have left their pursuers miles behind. Expert horsemen, they climb the ridges into one of their several hideouts, the notorious hole in the wall, or the rugged area known as Robber's Roost. Here, safe from pursuit, a few men could hold off an army. They will rest up for the next job, confident that no lawman will follow them here. These rugged areas of Wyoming and Utah became fortress sanctuaries. Not only did bandits join Cassidy's gang, there were men who turned to rustling because they felt their independence was threatened by big cattle outfits crowding them off the public range. Into hidden canyons went stolen cattle, security against the excesses of the big ranchers. Butch Cassidy became a legend not only because of the mystery surrounding his death, but because his special character inspired a comparison to Robin Hood. During his career as an outlaw, a fortune in gold passed through his hands, but he seldom held on to much of it for very long. He seemed to delight in the chase more than the rewards. He gave money to ranchers and townspeople who were in need, and they, in turn, helped him with their silence. Today, ranchers in the area feel that Butch was one of them. An expert cowhand between robberies, he was respected for his hard work and skill. They don't condone what Butch did, but with their own independence threatened today by big mining interests, they understand some of the forces that drove him.
And I found out later that it was Butch. So I worked with his brother right here. His brother Joe, him and I inherited cattle together. They wasn't killed in South America, I know that.
Our search for where and when Butch did die took us to the remote Wyoming town of Baggs. Galloping down Main Street, guns blazing, they headed for the Bulldog Saloon, where they would cut the road dust out of their dry throats with strong whiskey. Restored, they would roust out Tom Vernon, who played fiddle and owned the local hotel. Then, rounding up the available ladies, they would dance all night. Sheriff Ross Moore, today's successor to frontier lawman, sums up his town's attitude.
People around here thought old Butch was all right. He was a real nice fella, as far as they was concerned. He never done anything to anybody, and he always treated them right and never cheated them.
Even though they were outlaws, these people on Snake River would do about anything for them.
They'd stop at your place if you had a saddle horse, and their horse was tired. They'd take your horse and leave their tired horse and go on, but they'd always come back.
And they never did anything wrong because they knew that if they rode in to this country, they could get a place to stay all night or a fresh horse. He was a good-hearted old feller. He wouldn't kill you. He'd just steal your money.
They was good to these people on Snake River. But money in here, you know.
Damn it, they was all good guys.
For the most part, outlawing was hard and dangerous work. As an outlaw's reputation grew, so did the odds of getting caught. Alan Pinkerton's powerful detective agency assigned famed manhunter Charlie Siringo to take on the Wild Bunch. Though only 5 feet tall, Siringo could rope, tie, and ride with the best of them. Having spent a lifetime on the Western Range, he was well equipped to track his quarry. The Wild Bunch reacted to this pressure by moving into another lucrative field, train robbing. With Butch's masterminding, they continued to prosper. The Denver and Rio Grande Railway, $8,000. The Colorado and Southern, $45,000. The Union Pacific, $55,000. The Union Pacific responded by forming a special train-borne posse, transporting horses in a baggage car. About this time, Butch started working more closely with Harvey Longabout, known as the Sundance Kid. They shared a wry sense of humor. One day, after a particularly good haul, Butch and Sundance posed for a family portrait with the rest of the gang. It was a joke that would backfire and force them to flee the country. Sporting store-bought clothes and new derbies were Cool Killer Harvey Logan, Polecat Bill Carver, and Butch's pal, Sundance. Butch could barely suppress a grin at what he thought was a private joke. However, the proud photographer displayed the picture in his window, where it was spotted the next day by an amazed but delighted Pinkerton detective, who spread the alarm. Hearing this and sensing their luck had run out, the bandits bought tickets on the very trains they once robbed. An elegantly attired trio, Butch, Sundance, and his girl, the beautiful Etta Place, headed for South America by way of New York. The big city in 1902 must have been a dazzling sight to these now rich but still countrified Westerners. They mingled with the elite on Fifth Avenue, and Sundance and Etta had their portraits taken at a fashionable salon. With queenly grace, Etta proudly displayed a new and expensive gold watch. A few weeks later, the trio sailed for South America.
In Argentina, they worked as cattlemen until they were tracked down by a Pinkerton detective. Once more on the run, they returned to a life of crime throughout Chile, Bolivia, and Uruguay. In 1909, the story got out that Butch and Sundance were dead, killed in a gunfight in Mercedes, Uruguay. The Pinkerton agency eagerly accepted the story and closed the files on an old and frustrating case. But our research in Mercedes revealed no evidence that such a gunfight ever took place. Butch and Sundance's death a hoax? Perhaps still another way to outdistance pursuers?
One day in 1924, 15 years after the alleged gunfight, a lone figure was seen driving up a Wyoming road. As he came closer, he seemed somehow familiar. Could it have been Butch Cassidy returning home after all those years? Many believe Butch Cassidy returned long after he was supposed to have died in a South American gunfight.
Old Butch wasn't killed in South America. He came back here in 24, and my grandmother seen him and talked to him. So I know he was here. He stayed a day and a half and then left, but he was here and talked to everybody.
He come back from there and went down in Utah. He stopped in Bags one night.
He went up to some of these old places and visited before he left. So I know he's here in 24.
One can only imagine what might have gone through his mind if he had revisited the places of his raucous youth. Most of his companions were gone. Harvey Logan, dead in a gunfight with a posse. Ben Kilpatrick, killed attempting to rob a train. Bill Carver, outdrawn by a sheriff in Texas. And the ladies who danced had vanished or settled down. Only memories remained. The memories live on in Bags. Recollections of those still alive who remember Butch's nostalgic homecoming. In an old house on the outskirts of town lives a man who was a contemporary of Butch Cassidy's. Now, Alfred Brazel is surrounded by his animals and his memories. The dates he gives might be questioned, but he is positive about what he saw.
He was not killed because in 1916, as sure as I ever stand right here, that I seen him right here in this store. I seen him with my own eyes. Now, Butch had 3 pack horses and 1 saddle horse. They were tied right out right at the side of the store. And he said, Ed, that I want you to go and get me 3 or 4 quarts of whiskey. Ed says, why don't you do it? No, he said, I want you to go get it. And Ed only had to just step out at the door and go about 50 feet to the saloon. I'd seen him before. It wasn't the first time I'd seen Butch.
Author-historian John Rolfe Burroughs has interviewed others who were even closer to Butch.
I came through here in 1959 researching a story on the Wild Bunch. Among other people I talked to was Tom Vernon. Tom at that time was 80 years of age, but his mind was just as clear as a bell. And among other comments I happened to make at that time was that I had read an article by Arthur Chapman to the effect that Butch Cassidy had been killed in Bolivia, in South America. Tom looked me in the eye and he said, killed in Bolivia? He said, Butch came through here in the early 20s and stayed with me 2 days. We talked over the old times, said there's no mistake. I knew every one of the Wild Bunch well.
Now an expert historian has found evidence placing Butch Cassidy in this building in the early 1920s. John Burroughs has still more support for his conclusion.
I met a man in Rock Springs by the name of John Taylor, who had known Butch Cassidy when Butch Cassidy worked in the butcher shop in Rock Springs, and that's where Butch incidentally got his nickname. Mr. Taylor owned the Ford agency in Rock Springs, and he said one day he was out in the shop, and here came a Model T, and it was Butch Cassidy. This was in the early 1920s. He said Butch didn't recognize him and didn't say anything, but he said there was no mistake, that he knew him well. Another person who saw Butch after he returned from Bolivia, who knew him very well, was Josephine Bassett Morris. She was his girlfriend.
In an old log cabin where she lived alone, Josephine Bassett talked with Burroughs in 1965. Still showing signs of the beautiful girl she had been, Josephine told him that one night in the early 1920s in Rock Springs, Wyoming, Butch and his old friend Elza Lay knocked on her door.
Said they were both a little out of condition, but we sat around and had a few drinks and reminisced about the old times.
Josephine said that was the last time she saw Butch alive. We had one more important stop to make, 300 miles away. In southwest Utah is the wild and beautiful country where Butch spent his childhood, where he learned to ride, where he roamed free, when his name was still Robert Leroy Parker, and he lived on the ranch his father homesteaded near Circleville. Lula Parker Bettinson, Butch's 93-year-old sister, remembers.
When Butch came home, he went straight to the ranch, up at the Parker Ranch, because he thought we lived there. And how he wandered around. He loved the place. He had grown up there, and he was happy there. Disappointed to find no one there, he came to town.
Hoping to see his aging father once more, Butch picked up his brother Mark and drove to the Parker house in town. His father and Lula came to the door.
When Butch drove into the yard, he and Mark got out of the car and walked over to the house. First, of course, he was a stranger. He just thought somebody come home with the boys. But as they looked at each other and got closer, they knew each other. And what a greeting it was to have him home again. When I first saw Butch, I looked at him and I thought, oh, he belongs here. He's ours, he must be, you know. And yet I didn't know. And my father said to me, he said, I bet you don't know who this is. He said, this is your brother, Robert Leroy. And of course, then it was just really, but I felt like my feet, I couldn't stand. I was shocked, you know, in a way. So I didn't have it very long because he's so warm and so wonderful. And was so tickled to see me that it all turned out just right. When he came home, he could talk of nothing but Mother, no matter what we would be talking about. he would go back to her. He felt so terrible because he felt that he'd hurt her so badly. And he really did. And he felt it. He couldn't live it down. He said it was his heartache. And my father said to him, he said, you know, my boy, he said, you could have been most anything. He said, I know. And all I've done is make a wreck of my life. He wasn't a bit happy. I think he paid the debt over and over for what he done. Butch died in 1937 in the Northwest. And where he is buried, that is our secret. We do not tell it. My father gave us to understand when the word came of his death that there would never be told, because they had chased him. He said they have chased him all his life, and now he's going to rest in peace. No matter what, I would never tell it.
There are many theories about Butch's later years. In Billings, Montana, author Larry Pointer, after years of study, believes that this man, William T. Phillips, who moved to Spokane, Washington a year after Butch's supposed death, is Butch Cassidy. And the resemblance is remarkable. Phillips died in the Northwest in 1937, and his ashes were scattered over the Spokane River. An added irony is that for years, Phillips tried to sell the Butch Cassidy story to Hollywood. There were no takers. And what of Sundance and Etta? They seem to have disappeared completely from history. Only the legend remains. But legends die hard. We usually believe what we want to believe. Somehow we prefer to see Butch young and vigorous, falling in South America with guns blazing, rather than living out a mundane life. But wherever or whenever Robert Leroy Parker died, in our minds, he lives on as Butch Cassidy. It seems impossible that an empty desert could hide one of the world's greatest secrets. Yet in this wasteland stands a wondrous enigma, the Great Pyramids of ancient Egypt. Some call them tombs, others say they were beacons to ancient spacemen. Still others believe they are generators of energy. The secret of the pyramids has eluded men for thousands of years. If they were merely tombs for the pharaohs, why has no mummy ever been found in one? We do know that the ancients built great temples to the forces they believed ruled their lives after death. In sacred places, near the pyramids, Egyptians prepared the most important of their citizens for a journey into life everlasting. No other ancient civilization lavished as much genius on defeating time, on defeating death. Is it possible the Egyptians succeeded? Seldom do the dreams and wisdom of a civilization come together in a single work. It happened once, a very long time ago. In the pure and simple geometry of the pyramids, ancient Egypt may have found answers to profound mysteries. It is for modern men to rediscover them.
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanation, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
Cairo is often called the intellectual capital of the Arab world. It is a reputation founded in antiquity. Despite the crowding, poverty, and conflicts of the present, Cairo is irrevocably linked to its brilliant past. On the outskirts of the city are the reminders of an incredible dream. From the summit of the Great Pyramid of Cheops, it is still possible, after 4,000 years, to see ruined temples nestled at the foot of its ageless companion, the Pyramid of Khephren. Long ago, a staggering number of people and immense amounts of material were needed to construct the monoliths. The Egyptians must have had a very good reason for sacrificing so much. What was it?
In its finished form, the Great Pyramid was gleaming white and was capped with a block of some special material. The cap may have been polished granite or even gold. Higher than a 40-story building, the Great Pyramid was an awesome monument to some higher order in an untamed desert world. It is awesome still, more than 40 centuries later.
Through the ages, the mystery of the pyramid has inspired many theories. Among them, the idea that the pyramid is Earth-based one, remnant of the colonization of Earth by extraterrestrials. Others liken the pyramid to a mammoth radio beacon or a collector of some secret energy source. Whatever it was 4,000 years ago, it is today the single most perplexing monument in the world. What must the builders have been like? There is ample evidence that the ancients were fascinated with time and the rhythm of life along the Nile. Each year, their farmland would be renewed by rich deposits from the flooding river. If the soil could be revived, why not the spirit and body of man? The pyramids may have played a central part in a quest for immortality. Whatever their function, never has history seen such a total commitment of manpower and resources to a single task for so long a time. For each worker in the stone quarries or at the building site, several more would be needed to provide the food and other services required by so vast an enterprise. Unless the ancients had another way. Other great civilizations built artificial mountains. They reach above the jungle canopy of Yucatan and Central America. Steps to the stars. None, however, has inspired the intense curiosity that the pyramids of Egypt have. Part of the Egyptian secret may be that theirs was the only civilization to perfect the true pyramid. That burst of genius apparently occurred in the 3rd millennium before Christ at a place called Saqqara, west of modern Cairo. A pharaoh named Zoser commissioned the first known Egyptian pyramid. If Zoser's pyramid was intended to be a tomb, it was an unusual one. Tombs had previously been simple structures of mud brick. Never had they been translated to stone and stacked one atop the other. The next step in the evolution of the true pyramid was to create a smooth facing on a stepped pyramid. The attempt failed, and the pyramid collapsed. Only the central core was left standing. The disaster occurred as work was advancing on another pyramid. Mindful of the lesson, the architect obviously switched to a shallower angle, creating the so-called bent pyramid. The neighboring pyramid is newer and constructed at the same shallow angle as the upper portion of the bent pyramid. Experiments continued for perhaps 1,000 years. Incredibly, 80 structures survive, providing vivid examples of pyramid evolution. The glory days of the Pyramid Age came around 2500 BC, when the pharaoh Cheops ordered a pyramid built at Giza. The angles were steep and the scale gargantuan. Cheops' successor, Khephren,
built another pyramid nearby. It is slightly smaller, but no less perfect in symmetry or design. The orthodox view is that the pyramids were constructed using large ramps of brick and earth. These ramps would be constructed at gentle angles so that huge gangs of workers could push the big building blocks upwards. This traditional view holds that once the interior core of the pyramid was finished, the job of surfacing the pyramid would begin at the top and work down. The ramps would be dismantled along the way. How many years of labor must it have taken to move those blocks? When the Greek historian Herodotus stood at the foot of the Great Pyramid in 450 BC, he was told that it was built in 30 years by a rotating workforce of 120,000 men. Khephren pyramid must have required a similar effort. It should be remembered that the Egyptians accomplished other feats in their golden age. They developed surgery, plotted the movements of their stars, and worked with advanced mathematics. What the ancients accomplished, they apparently did without benefit of the pulley or block and tackle. It is clear, however, that the Egyptians had developed the powers of their minds to a high degree. Science is only beginning to learn what those powers can mean. The simple and amazing fact is that the Egyptians consistently built on a colossal scale. If we had only their monuments and temples to judge them by, we would have to assume they were a race of giants. What mystery did the Sphinx guard? Was there something inside the pyramid? In the 9th century AD, an Arab prince named Mahmud rode to the pyramids with no thought of their grandeur. It was treasure he was after. His men set to work with gunpowder and battering rams. When they had breached the outer defenses of the pyramid, they found only a labyrinth of passageways and chambers. They were empty. The secret had not yielded to force. The Great Pyramid is unique in the complexity of its interior. Slicing the pyramid from north to south, we get this view. Our scale is exaggerated for a better look at the design. The pyramid rests on a central mound of uncleared earth, perhaps left as a base for constructing the first few levels of blocks. The entrance is in the north face, 55 feet above the ground. A corridor extends 60 feet down into the pyramid, where it joins another corridor 129 feet in length. This corridor leads by another passageway to the so-called Queen's Chamber and to a gallery 153 feet long and 28 feet high. Beyond this magnificent gallery is the King's Chamber, repository of one of mankind's most enduring mysteries. Today, visitors can see the chamber just as it was when it was opened 1,000 years ago. It may indeed have been intended as the final resting place for Cheops. No body has been found, however, and the rough finish of the granite centerpiece may indicate that the builders changed their minds. But here, question piles upon question. Another puzzle is the existence of shafts extending from the King's Chamber and the Grand Gallery to the surface of the pyramid. They may have been designed simply for ventilation, or they may have worked to align the pyramid with some planet or star which could be sighted through the shaft at regular intervals during the Earth's movement through the heavens. Surviving records of the Pyramid Age indicate that the Egyptians had an advanced knowledge of astronomy. This could explain how the faces of the pyramid are so precisely aligned with the cardinal points of the compass. It does not explain why it was so important for the pyramids to be perfectly tuned to the stars.
The architectural patterns established so long ago by the best minds of Egypt are still in use today. Although no one knows anything for sure about the origin or purpose of the true pyramid, many believe they can tap its supposed powers. Belief in pyramid power has generated a multi-million-dollar industry. Pyramid models are thought to be able to perform a variety of miracles, from enhancing sexual potency to mummifying meat and sharpening razor blades. Others see in the dimensions of the Great Pyramid a detailed forecast of humanity's future. The future never seemed to be in doubt for the ancients. Scholars have labored for years over the hauntingly beautiful carvings that decorate the great monuments of Egypt. They tell us that the most important qualities of life were harmony with the gods and the permanence of the established order. In the panorama of Egypt's 27 centuries of unparalleled accomplishments, there was not the slightest indication that anyone thought it would ever come to an end. Yet it did. But why? Perhaps a clue lies in the belief that even the lifetime of the humblest peasant could extend beyond the grave. There was one condition: the body must remain preserved and undisturbed. The rites of death were performed in elaborate temples, way stations for the immortal soul. Preparation of the body took 70 days. Internal organs were removed, and the shell of the body treated with salts and exotic oils. Enough mummies have been found to testify to the skill of the ancient technicians of immortality. Is it possible the Egyptians dreamed of a day when techniques more advanced than their own could restore vigor to dry flesh? Scientists are using modern techniques on the mummies, not to restore them to life, of course, but to learn something of the remarkable people who built pyramids and dreamed of life everlasting. X-rays reveal that the Egyptian of the period was small in stature and likely to fall victim to the same diseases which afflict mankind today. If the deceased was of noble blood, his funeral would include a symbolic boat. The boat would be borne by priests in the guise of the deities, who would ensure that the spirit was ready for a voyage to the kingdom of the dead. There would be a preliminary voyage across the River Nile to the West Bank, where cities of the dead were traditionally built. After the Pyramid Age, the greatest of these was the Valley of the Kings in Upper Egypt. It was in the Valley of the Kings that Howard Carter discovered the undisturbed tomb of Tutankhamun. The discovery remains the richest in the history of Egyptian archaeology. Tutankhamun was a minor king who died young after a brief reign. Cheops reigned more than 20 years and had the wealth and the power to construct one of the wonders of the world. If the mortuary temple near the Great Pyramid is any indication, Cheops' funeral must have been a far more lavish affair. If he was buried in the pyramid, he may be there still, and with him, treasure beyond anything seen so far. Small wonder Cheops took precautions.
Once Cheops was entombed, the pyramid was sealed by workers inside. Starting with the ascending corridor, they would push or drop large blocks into each connection with another corridor. Did the workers then perish with their dead king? Probably not. A crude passageway has been found, which starts deep beneath the pyramid and eventually leads back outside. The workers charged with protecting Cheops for all eternity apparently protected themselves with a hidden way out.
It may be that the hidden way out provided looters with access to Cheops' tomb. It is just as likely that Cheops' secret is still safely locked inside the pyramid. At Stanford Research Laboratory in Menlo Park, California, a team directed by geophysicist Lambert Dolphin is preparing another assault on the secrets of the pyramid.
The Great Pyramid is an example of a structure beautifully finished on the exterior originally. The casing stones were so perfect. Where you see them in place, they're beautifully, accurately finished, but the interior stones are very rough. When you can crawl inside the interior passages, the tourist doesn't see. The interior construction is rough. That says to me that no astronauts from outer space using laser stone-cutting tools built the pyramids. We put razor blades inside the real pyramids and flowers and fruit. Our experience last time in the Pyramid of Cheops was that the razor blades rusted, the flowers wilted, and rats ate the fruit. So firsthand, we have no evidence of pyramid power operating in the real pyramids. I personally am very skeptical about the power of the pyramids to influence human behavior or sharpen razor blades, apart from the strong powers of human suggestion in a belief system. When people believe in something strongly, they can make it come true, and that's pyramidology, and then that's a lot of other phenomenon as well. I'm skeptical also about lost golden tablets from Atlantis being buried in the area. I don't believe the Egyptians needed some kind of esoteric outer space technology to do what they did. What they did was very impressive. 100,000 men working for 30 years is an awful lot of labor and effort to build one pyramid, and that kind of construction went on for 200 or 300 years.
Dr. Dolphin is pioneering a new technology which may enable archaeologists to peer through the pyramids electronically without destroying them.
Our work in 1974 using radar was unsuccessful because radio signals do not penetrate the pyramids well. The radio waves are absorbed in the damp stone. We went back, however, last February with sound waves, acoustic sounding techniques, and found a number of anomalies. Places in the pyramids, around the pyramids, where there appear to be either chambers, cracks, either man-made or natural. An example of an anomaly which we think needs to be checked further is an apparent cavity in between the king's chamber and the queen's chamber in the Pyramid of Cheops. Our sounder indicates something there where there ought to be solid rock.
If there is a hidden chamber in the pyramid, will it contain unimaginable treasure? Or will it be just another cipher, leaving the long rest of Cheops undisturbed and the secrets of the pyramids intact? As the treasures of Tutankhamun tour the United States, it is clear that interest in Egyptology has never been greater. Perhaps people are responding to a dissatisfaction with the way modern thinkers view the world, a yearning to understand a more ancient and tranquil wisdom.
I certainly believe that Western science has demythologized our contemporary society too much, that there really is mystery all around us. I'm dedicated to the rediscovery of the mystery in life, to the unknown, to the unusual, to the rare. I think that Egypt is a place where there are many exciting discoveries yet to be made. The pyramids still have their secrets. The discoveries to be made in the years to come are likely to be dramatic and sensational as man learns more about himself and his origins. And Cairo itself is a city of mystery. The East is an exotic place. It stirs the very best in man. And I think we've lost that kind of consciousness in the course of becoming Western civilized man.
Perhaps the ultimate accomplishment of the pyramid builders is yet to be realized. Their monuments may one day lead us to rediscover the greater wonder that is the mind of man.
powerful hurricane is moving in fast from 100 miles at sea. In hours, it will strike land with devastating force. In the face of a hurricane's fury, we are left completely helpless. From space, a full-grown hurricane appears as a giant pinwheel of swirling clouds. On Earth, they are the most violent and frightening of all nature's storms.
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
Since the 1930s, the daring work of newsreel cameramen has allowed us to glimpse the violent power of hurricanes. With little warning, they pound against our coastlines like sledgehammers. In their unpredictable rage, they lash against anything that stands in their way. The destruction to property is enormous. Their toll in human lives is massive. Centuries ago, the Indians of the Caribbean worshipped and feared a powerful sky god called Huracan. Today, the storms we call hurricanes demand an equal respect. They remain the largest, most powerful storms on Earth, and their uncontrolled fury can still inspire both awe and terror. Tuesday, August 4th, 1969. An orbiting weather satellite spots a small patch of turbulence in the mid-Atlantic. The rainstorm is one of 100 that form every year over the ocean's tropical waters. The warm sea creates funnels of air that billow up thousands of feet. The clouds gather together. The Earth's rotation gives them spin. A hurricane is born. On Thursday, August 13th, a team of Navy hurricane hunters flies directly into the storm.
Hot bust on. Engineer, maintain my airspeed at 190 knots. Aye, sir. RPM 2600 says. I'm going down to 500 feet. Metro, keep that wind on the wing.
To pierce into the tranquil eye, they fly low, barely above the water.
Approaching 500 feet. Metro, steady. Level 500. Seagull Metro. Request range and bearing to the eye. Seagull, roger. This is the penetration heading. Eye is dead ahead. Your escape heading is remain 300. Crew from pilot, we are starting our penetration run. RPM 2600. RPM 2600. Oxygen on. Engineer, maintain my airspeed at 190 knots. Aye, sir. Solid signal. Go ahead, Nico. We're approaching one of the rain bands. It looks like it's pretty rough. I've got a saucer
degrees, 120 knots. Pressure is dropping rapidly. I read 310, 120 knots down there. Well, that was a rough one.
Finally, in the eye, instruments measure the hurricane's strength and gauge its size and speed.
Pressure, temperature, and wind eye.
The early indications are alarming. It is a big storm and still growing. For more than a week, the storm churns across the Atlantic and into the Caribbean Sea. There she lingers, gathering strength. Her final path still unknown. The third hurricane of the season, she is named Camille. A hurricane watch goes up along the entire Gulf Coast. No one knows yet exactly where Camille will strike, but at harbors and marinas everywhere, boaters prepare for the worst. Suddenly, the message goes out. Camille has made her move. She's heading directly for the Mississippi coast. Sunday, August 16th. Advance winds hit the coastline. Everywhere, people start boarding up. More than 50,000 people take the advice to leave, to evacuate upstate and find safety inland. As the hurricane draws closer, there are those who choose to stay behind. The young, the unbelievers, the thrill seekers, the sightseers, the stubborn. By afternoon, the winds begin to roar. Camille is churning dangerously close. Some now attempt a last-minute escape. For most, it is too late. The roads are blocked or washed away. In the drenching rain and wind, levees collapse, flooding entire towns. At dusk, the full force of the storm reaches Mississippi. Wind velocity hits 200 miles per hour. Are falling, starting fires. Tornadoes spin off randomly, blowing homes to bits. At midnight, a final blow. A 30-foot tidal surge smashes the coast. Miraculously, some survive. By morning, it is over. The coastline is in shambles. Entire towns are wiped away. $200,000 are homeless. More than 250 are dead. Dazed, the survivors stumble out. Each in his own way measures his loss.
It's bound to be in here somewhere because all these are the houses that came from in this vicinity. They're all right in here in this neighborhood. But mine was right on the corner and I don't even see it. Yonder! That gray one yonder, that's my house. And my house was under 12 feet of water.
And I've seen that about all my family has had destruction of their homes. I hope I never see nothing like this again. I'm mighty young, but it takes this hard blow.
And I lost my shoes and half of my clothes I had on, but the lady lent me some clothes to wear, and she lent me a pair of shoes for me to walk home with, and I'm thankful, and I did a lot of praying. And Junior, darling, we all are right, sweetheart. I love you. Now, don't worry about us. We all right, darling. And hello to all of you. Thank the Lord. Another one will never catch us here, because if we hear of another one coming, we're leaving here and go way upstate like you asked Mama to do. So, okay, now I love y'all.
In its sheer destructive intensity, no storm in recorded history has matched Camille. It was the greatest storm of any kind to ever affect this nation. Inevitably, there will be others. Miami, 1965. The early winds of a coming storm offered some residents an opportunity to play. The fun, however, was short-lived. Roaring quickly toward the coast was a hurricane named Betsy. It was the first to threaten eastern Florida in several years. Winds built to over 125 miles an hour. The hurricane had arrived. The storm pushed tons of water into Miami Beach. The ground floors of houses and hotels turned into rivers and pools. Before dawn, it was over. A freighter had been tossed onto the beach, but altogether, Miami was lucky. The brunt of the hurricane had hit to the south. Miami had only been brushed. Today, weather scientists use flying laboratories to study hurricanes for their working secrets. A gust probe measures the atmosphere a split second ahead of the plane. Elaborate sensor and data systems record air motion, temperature, and humidity. Linked to airborne computers, the information can be instantly analyzed. We still lack an exact knowledge of how and why hurricanes form, but we are constantly learning more about their complex functioning. Discoveries made on experimental reconnaissance flights may someday save countless lives from the most violent storm on Earth. At the National Hurricane Center in Miami, weathermen keep constant track of storms that may reach our coasts. It is their job to warn us where and when a hurricane will strike. A huge coastal radar net is but one part of the center's hurricane detection and early warning system. A flow of weather data from satellites, ships, and remote ocean buoys is instantly analyzed for potential danger. A special hurricane teletype circuit issues immediate warnings whenever a hurricane threatens. Sudden changes in a storm's path are reported at once to those in danger. Dr. Neil Frank is director of the National Hurricane Center. He heads all hurricane detection and warning operations for the entire United States.
Our knowledge about hurricanes has increased tremendously over the last, say, 20, 30 years. We now got satellites that have come along since the 60s. We had radar as a byproduct of World War II. Another byproduct of World War II was aircraft reconnaissance, and we started sending military airplanes out into these storms to give us information about them. There's been no question about a tremendous increase in our understanding. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to realize that same understanding in our forecast accuracy, so that we're not forecasting that much better today.
Miami Beach, a comfortable place in the sun that in recent years, like the rest of the coastline, has attracted large numbers of new residents. In Miami, as in nearly every other coastal city, there is a potential for hurricane disaster. A huge percentage of its population has never experienced a major hurricane.
So it's been 25 years since we've experienced much activity over the state of Florida, and over 15 years since the people along the East Coast have experienced bad hurricanes. And that's where our greatest population increase is taking place at the present time. Now, the fear that we have is that people might become complacent. Now, in the meantime, the East Coast and even Florida has had some near misses, and we've been brushed by some, and we've had to post some warnings at times, and then the storm went someplace else, or we've gone through the fringes of some minor storms, had a weak storm come by, and we've developed some false impressions. And false impressions lead to poor decisions, maybe in the wake of the next hurricane that comes by that could indeed be a big one. The last major hurricane that we've had here was in 1926, a real big storm.
On September 17th, Miami was devastated by a direct hit. A hurricane of unparalleled power lashed at Miami for 11 hours and left the city destroyed. Based on the damage that Miami suffered in 1926, Dr. Frank has made a projection of what would happen if such a storm struck again. Here on Key Biscayne, the large hotels and condominiums will quickly flood to the second floor. Any structures not built on pilings will be in danger of collapse. As the hurricane sweeps in, the rest of Key Biscayne will go completely underwater. Most smaller dwellings will be flooded or submerged under the churning storm. People who do not evacuate in time will have little chance for survival. In South Miami Beach, hundreds of small hotels and apartments will be smashed and flooded by tons of water. The buildings are occupied mainly by the aged and retired. It is doubtful that everyone could be evacuated. Facing directly into the path that a killer storm will take are the large and famous hotels of Miami Beach. Those that have been strongly built will survive even the biggest storm. Yet staying inside to weather it out could be a nightmare. Water from the huge tidal surge will blast through the ground floors, tearing out walls and stairways. Power will be cut off, leaving those inside trapped in darkness on the upper floors. People with medical problems will be left helpless. In the rest of Miami, flooding, severe winds and tornadoes will damage or destroy thousands of buildings. The death toll could be enormous. Yet knowing what might happen, will Miamians evacuate if warned?
Oh, well, I think I'd pay pretty much attention to the weather reports, and if I got enough warning, I'd try to leave.
I don't know. I think my instinct would be to hide under a table. But I'm from New York, and I've never been in a hurricane. And I guess I'd probably want to run right out in it.
Well, if they're on the water, they'll evacuate, but if they know they're comfortable, nothing's going to happen. then they'll stay there, and it's a good reason to have a party.
In 1969, despite numerous warnings that Hurricane Camille was on the way, 28 people gathered in a third-floor hotel room to have a hurricane party. The Hotel Richelieu in Mississippi did not weather the storm. Of the 28 partygoers, only one survived. An 8-year-old boy floated out of the third-story window on a mattress.
Camille in 1969, a Category 5 type storm, taught them some very bitter lessons. I hope it doesn't take that kind of a storm to teach the rest of us who live along the coastline those same kind of lessons. You know, an old philosopher once said that those who ignore history are condemned to relive it. I like that word, condemned. And there's no reason today why we should have to experience those same kind of bitter lessons. There's a lot of hurricane history around, and if we'll take the time, we can learn those lessons and not have to go through those same kind of experiences.
The recorded history of hurricanes compels us to respect their awesome power. In 1737, hurricanes killed 300,000 near Calcutta. In 1900, more than 6,000 people died when a powerful storm swept over Galveston, Texas. In 1970, on the coast of East Pakistan, a single storm killed nearly 500,000 people. Today, we still know very little about how hurricanes begin and exactly what forces determine their paths. For now, at least, if threatened by their fury, we should heed the warnings of the past. Swamps inspire fear in many minds. Dark and damp, they are full of mystery and creatures that slither in the mud. An experienced guide entered Louisiana's Honey Island swamp one fall day in 1973. The outing would become the stuff nightmares are made of. Normally, the trek held few terrors for the guide. Even the lethal alligator was rarely a problem for an experienced outdoorsman. The guide would discover something else lurking in these quiet waters, something that struck his boat. Is it possible that an unknown creature lives on the edge of man's civilized world? The Honey Island swamp is only an hour's drive from New Orleans. Once entered, however, it is the forest primeval. Deep within the Honey Island swamp, a creature described as half man, half beast has been tracked. For the hunter, as well as the hunted, the search is a dangerous game.
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
There is a land of endless winter where the air is thin and clean, with peaks soaring 5 miles high to form the icy roof of the world, the Himalayas. The nomad Sherpas who tend their flocks on harsh alpine meadows believe they are not alone in the wilderness. They know the mountains are gods, and that the gods have spawned good and evil spirits who keep watch from the highest crags. The most frightening of these spirits is the man-beast the Sherpa call Yeti. Western men call him the abominable snowman. Abominable because legend says he kills those foolish enough to enter his frozen world. Sir Edmund Hillary had heard of the abominable snowman, but along with Sherpa Tenzing Norgay, he challenged the elements and the unknown to scale Mount Everest in 1953. Hillary would bravely return years later to search for the monster, but would find nothing. Other places in the world have secrets to tell, and there are other men fascinated by mystery. One such place is America's Pacific Northwest. One such man is Peter Byrne. Like the Himalayas, this is a high and lonely land, as yet unvanquished by the steady surge of humanity called progress. Byrne once hunted game in the foothills of the Himalayas, where he became fascinated with accounts of the Yeti. Now he roams the Northwest, substituting camera for gun, in search of another man-like beast, Bigfoot. Men of strong character have challenged this wilderness before. In 1924, a group of rugged miners staked a claim near Mount St. Helens in Washington state. They reported that early one morning, they were attacked by giant rock-throwing beasts. The battle lasted hours.
The miners thought they had killed one of the creatures, but no trace was ever found. Bigfoot and the abominable snowman have much in common. Perhaps Bigfoot migrated here across the ancient land bridge that once joined Asia with North America.
A world away from the mountains is the urbane and colorful city of New Orleans. Yet less than 40 miles from the Superdome, concrete and steel give way again to wilderness. Called Honey Island Swamp, 27,000 acres of sluggish streams, still ponds, and dense subtropical forest make up another of the world's great remaining primitive areas. Life on the edge of this vast Mississippi Delta bayou seems prosaic enough, with comfortable old homes punctuating lush farmland. In the little towns and farmhouses, however, stories are exchanged about a creature said to lurk deep within the swamp. Few outsiders ever hear them, perhaps for good reason. Ted Williams farms a small plot of land near Honey Island. He also traps muskrat and mink. One day, it appeared he'd been trapped himself.
The first time I ever saw it was standing plumb still like a stump. Went on a trap line, and I stopped after I realized it wasn't a stump. I knew it wasn't supposed to be there. And it run. When I stopped, it run. It was a dark gray, about 7 foot high. And it jumped a bayou. That's the first sighting I ever saw. The next time I seen them was they swimming the river, 2 of them. And one of them was bigger than the other, and one of them was faster than the other, and they swim just like a human. Them long overhand strokes. I tried to get one of them to look at me, and the other one run off, got out of the way, and the other one never would look at me. And I could have shot it, but I wouldn't do it on account it wouldn't look at me. It looked too much like a human to me. Broad shoulders, with arms hang down below its knees. Hands looked almost like a human. Well, I don't like to talk about it because people don't believe what you say, what you've seen. I don't like to be called a liar. Nobody do.
There are those who scoff at Ted Williams and say his story is beyond belief, beyond comprehension. The swamp is undeniably vast, however, and still largely unexplored. It could hide an incredible secret for a very long time. Ted Williams is not the only one to confess seeing something frightening in the swamp. While some still prefer to keep quiet, others have begun a systematic search for the creature.
At this time, we're well within the interior of Honey Island Swamp, and you can tell by our surroundings here, it's a pretty desolate area. This is one of the main spots here that we're at now. When we came through going to the camp and we first encountered this creature was in this very area right here.
Harlan Ford is a retired air traffic controller who has lived near the swamp for 20 years.
Going to the camp, pitching through this ravine right here is where we found where it had been leading off of this ridge, coming right through this little ravine bottom on this wet ground. And this is where we first found its tracks, and it was watering about 50 yards over at this creek over here. And at no time did we find any tracks where it had gone in the water. But once it would get to this water's edge, just as a bear would do or something, then I guess it would let down to drink. And that's when we would find the heavy clawed front feet of this creature. One evening late, just about dusk dark, a friend of mine, we encountered eyes. They were yellow or amberish color and real wide apart. So this friend of mine, Jim Hartzog, he took a gun, went into this area and to try to kill whatever it was. And he says that he came face to face with this thing. It looked something like 8, about 7 foot tall. And he fired on it with using a headlight. But he said when he did, the eyes went out. Probably what happened, it turned and ran, and he shot at it one more time. And but we went back the next day and checked for sign and blood, but we didn't find any. So we figured Jim missed it that night. The last sign that we've had, or anybody has had, of this creature, and this is within the last 4 months, was on the sandbar where the thing crossed the river, crossed the sandbar, and left footprints on it. And that was found by a member of the Louisiana Wildlife and Fish Commission. And that's been the very last contact we've had with it in this area.
Men are hunting the creature with guns. It seems unlikely the next encounter will be a peaceful one. If finally cornered, what will the creature do? Honey Island Swamp has been largely ignored by men and seemingly forgotten by time. Monster hunter Harlan Ford is among those who believe a prehistoric relative of man may have been isolated here ages ago, developing in its own way, unmolested by the winds of evolutionary change. Ford is pressing his search deeper into the swamp. He's walking where few men before him have gone. Traditional scientists have largely ignored the reports of monster sightings. Ford hopes to come up with evidence that will change their minds. A track, obviously fresh. It resembles nothing that is known to inhabit the swamp. Clearly, the track was not made by a man. Ford believes he must move deeper still into the swamp. Darkness is approaching, however, and Ford is a prudent man. The tracks ascribed to the monster give Louisiana state naturalist George Stevens a clue to its size.
from what we can find out, from the tracks we've found in the woods, I would say that he's about, well, from the young to the old. It's hard to estimate how large the young are, but if something like this has a 10 or 12-inch track, and if he puts enough weight on that track to bury in the sand or the mud so deep, then you can estimate something about what he might weigh. So I'd say a full-grown male adult probably would weigh better than 400 pounds, stand about 7, maybe 8 feet tall, and be almost completely covered with hair.
A frightening picture, but it will take more than plaster casts of 3-toed webbed feet to convince the skeptical. Michael Nahey has his own ideas of what the monster might look like. Nahey is a professional makeup artist in New Orleans. He was commissioned to study the available evidence on the creature and devise a model to match eyewitness accounts. The feet were constructed to exactly match one recent set of tracks. The face mask couldn't be as accurate. It does, however, match the descriptions of several eyewitnesses. We still don't know where the creature came from, how it has avoided man for so long, or how it survives in the hostile world of Honey Island Swamp. If a man can survive in the bayou without tools or fire, it follows that a man-like creature can. Major Gavin Storter is an Army Ranger and specialist in swamp survival. We challenged him to spend some time in the bayou and evaluate his chances of lasting very long.
As long as you can overcome your fear of it and try to understand what's there, you usually have very little problems as far as the food sources go, or negotiating, moving, or anything else. The biggest thing I would be concerned with would be the plant life. What plants could afford me an obstacle, or would afford me an obstacle should I have to move around or try to move around after dark. I would also look for food sources, both animal and plant life, and the feasibility of catching animals. To live and remain healthy, you would have to spend almost all waking hours, just like an animal, gathering food. Most of the plant life is edible, if you can get it past your mouth. There's palm hearts, which are very good, very tasty. There's a lot of lily-type plants that have large roots that are very edible. Taste a lot like radishes or turnips.
If the swamp monster does exist, it must have had a long time to adapt to its environment. Major Storter's experience suggests that the creature would be omnivorous, including everything from ants to leaves to large animals in its diet. It is clear that only with great cunning and strength could a large creature endure very long.
As far as the insect life goes, there would be a lot of insects that could be eaten. And animals are in abundance, both turtles, snakes, possums, armadillos that could be captured and eaten.
Major Storter teaches that a man's inhibitions can be overcome, that whatever he needs for basic survival is available to him in the swamp. The monster would have no problem with squeamishness. It would, however, have to roam the swamp almost constantly in search of its next meal, and would be roaming even now. The incessant need to hunt might explain the creature's apparently aggressive behavior. There are other large predators with which the monster would have to compete for food. It is difficult to imagine, however, that a creature supposedly 8 feet tall and cunning enough to outwit humans would have natural enemies. Man alone seems capable of posing a serious threat to a creature as clever and aggressive as this one is supposed to be. Men are clever and aggressive too. The threat becomes more real as interest in the swamp mystery increases. Nature's balance is delicate. So far, however, only a few men have penetrated deep into Honey Island swamp. Man and monster are not in direct competition for food. It is possible to assume that as men slowly encroach on the swamp, these legendary creatures will be in retreat. There are those who have reason to believe that someday someone will get hurt.
My wife and I were going on a fishing trip about 4 years ago. And about 9 o'clock that night, well, I heard this peculiar noise that screamed out down the river, I'd say a half a mile away.
Perry Ford and his wife were about to spend the most terrifying night of their lives.
My wife wanted me to build a fire, so I was out gathering up wood, you know, to build a big fire. And it screamed again. This time it was closer. I'd say it was maybe 300 yards from us this time. This really scared her, and it scared me. I tried to let her know it scared me, you know, but so I went ahead and kept on building fires, and less than 10 minutes later it squalled again, and this time it was right on top of us, you know. It almost shook the leaves off the trees.
Who or what was it that terrorized the Fords that night in the swamp? No one really knows. If we are on a collision course, man and monster, then it will be tragic for both. It would be a pity if it took such a tragedy to finally solve the mystery of the Honey Island monster. Mankind may have evolved from a swamp like this eons ago. Perhaps we left a part of ourselves behind.
I know what I saw, and I know what we got on. And since then, we don't sleep in that camp without a nylon rope on the door or without a loaded gun. From my standpoint, I'll relate it just like it is. And if people believe it, they believe it. If they don't, they don't. We can't control what people think. But whatever it is still in there. You can take and walk in there today, and where you walk at today in there, I would say that there's spots in there no man has ever walked on before. It's that remote. And therefore, that whatever this is that exists, I don't say it's a monster. I don't know what it is. But whatever this is, if it prowls and continues to prowl at night in a swamp area this huge, it could stay in there another 200 or 300 years and not be located.
It is easier to explain the existence of a hitherto unknown creature in Honey Island swamp than to understand the apparent indifference of scientists to evidence and eyewitness accounts. What is needed is a thorough, objective search for the man-like creature that has been reported here. It will not further our progress to turn our backs on what may well be our past. Millions of years before the dawn of man, ants had learned to live in large, complex societies. They had also mastered the art of war. Since their sources of food were much larger than themselves, they killed their prey by strategic attack. Today, a highly aggressive, often deadly breed of ant threatens to spread like a plague throughout much of the United States. Fire ants. They are named for their painful, burning sting. Fire ants will quickly devour nearly anything. Fire ants attack their victims only in large groups. They are multiplying quickly, and there is no known way to stop them.
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
In the tropical jungles of Central and South America, everyday reality can have the appearance of pure illusion. Animated leaves seem to march down a hanging vine. In truth, each leaf's movement is the work of a tiny but powerful ant. They are known as the leaf cutters. Leaf cutters are the farmers of the jungle. One colony transports over a ton of leaves a year to its underground city. The leaves themselves will not be eaten. A fungus which will grow on the stored leaves provides the entire colony with its single source of food. Leaf-cutter ants have tremendous strength. Held by the ant's powerful mandibles, a single leaf weighing as much as the ant itself will often be carried more than 100 yards. To equal this feat, a man would have to carry 150 pounds in his teeth. For nearly every jungle animal, survival hangs in delicate balance. Both predator and prey are highly affected by the slightest change in the jungle's fragile ecology. Food cannot be taken for granted. Its abundance is never assured. If the tapir cannot find its daily requirement of buried roots and bulbs, it faces starvation. The tiny ant, however, has a distinct advantage over other jungle species. It is older, more resilient to change, and much better adapted to its unpredictable environment. The hollow branches of a young cecropia tree is the favored home of Aztec ants. The Aztecs have powerful mandibles and a vicious bite. If their tree is disturbed in any way, the entire colony will swarm out to attack the intruder. A foreign vine placed against the tree quickly rallies the colony in defense of its home. The frenzied attack will not end until the vine has been completely removed. The tamandua, or anteater, will rarely venture a visit to a cecropia tree. It is content to search for termite nests high in the branches of other trees. Among the most legendary and feared of all jungle predators is a group of tiny, fast-moving ants. They travel like soldiers in well-organized columns, continually searching for food. The highly developed cooperation among hundreds of thousands of ants transforms their mobile colony into a single ferocious creature. They are called army ants. When army ants move through the jungle, they establish temporary bivouacs by forming a solid mass with their own bodies. Using their hooked feet, thousands of workers attach themselves together in successive rows. The rows hang down to form an intricate living wall which protects the queen inside. Every morning, hundreds of raiding parties set out in search of prey. A chance encounter with a rival species of army ants sets the stage for the day's first battle. Both ants are armed with sharp mandibles and a deadly sting. They will fight to the death. While raiding columns frantically hunt for other sources of food, a powerful bite finally cripples the opponent. A larger prey suffers a coordinated mass attack. Once it has been paralyzed by dozens of stings, the army ants carefully dissect their victim and carry it piece by piece back to the bivouac. In a single day, thousands of insects will become helpless victims of the ravenous army ant. Wherever raiding ants move, other animals follow along, hoping to feed on their fleeing prey. There are other kinds of deadly ants which live in the jungle completely alone. They are solitary hunters and highly efficient killers. For the predaceous ant, a much larger katydid makes an easy victim. Nearly an inch long, the predaceous ant will attack insects many times its size. Possessed of incredible strength, it can easily lift the katydid and carry it off. Its venom is deadly. A single sting can paralyze, even kill a grown man.
Most of us regard ants as insignificant pests, a nuisance in the kitchen or at a picnic. But for many people in the United States, that attitude has undergone a forcible change. The problem has been caused by a tiny but fierce red ant, the fire ant. In fields and pastures throughout the South, large earth mounds loom above the ground, signaling that the invader is there. The mounds are built and inhabited by fire ants. The fire ant mound forms only the tip of a vast colony which can extend 20 feet underground. Highly aggressive, the fire ant's armament includes razor-sharp mandibles for biting and a painful burning sting that gives the ant its name. Within each fire ant colony, specialized workers do nothing but build and repair. The work is constant. It begins when the colony is established and the mound itself must be built. As the colony grows, new tunnels and chambers must be added continually. In about 3 years, the mound may reach over a yard high and contain more than 250,000 ants. If split down the middle, the mound is revealed as an intricate network of interconnecting tunnels and chambers. Buried deep in some of the chambers lie the developing eggs of new ants. The eggs are frequently moved from place to place by specialized workers. When the sun warms the mound, eggs are carried toward the top. At night or during cold weather, the developing brood is hauled deep below ground level where the temperature is warmer. Other workers specialize in storing food or in keeping the mound clean. Still others stand on constant guard, ready to sound an alert. The slightest disturbance to the mound instantly rallies thousands of biting, stinging ants in defense of the colony. The aggressive fire ants wage regular warfare on all other kinds of ants they encounter. Unable to see or hear, they communicate their strategy by chemical odors called pheromones. They rarely lose a battle. Wherever fire ants have spread,
they have quickly eradicated native ants, establishing themselves as the singular species. Fire ants are voracious predators. Their colonies require a huge and regular supply of food. Given to attacking in overwhelming numbers, fire ants will actually delay an attack until sufficient ants have gathered to ensure an easy conquest. Fire ants devour insects as the mainstay of their diet. They also eat earthworms, grubs, and spiders. Fire ants attack beneficial insects as well as harmful ones. They are indiscriminate killers. In many parts of the South, vast areas are scarred with more than 200 fire ant mounds per acre. In the United States, fire ants have no natural enemies. At present, there is no way to stop them. Today, fire ants infest more than 150 million acres in 9 southern states, from North Carolina to Texas. Highly adaptable, their mounds can be found nearly everywhere. In parks and playgrounds, in fields and vacant city lots, along sidewalks and roadsides, around houses, on lawns, near schools and hospitals, even in the middle of cities. The main shopping street of Gulfport, Mississippi is completely undermined with thousands of fire ant tunnels. The ants have no problem finding food and thriving. The red fire ant is a relative newcomer to this country. They arrived in Mobile, Alabama, sometime between 1933 and 1945. A few ants were probably hidden in the cargo of a freighter from their native Brazil. They jumped ship and quickly multiplied. By the early 1950s, farmers started to complain. The fire ant had begun to interfere with their livelihood. The ants' hard earth mounds clogged equipment and bent cutting blades. No longer just a bothersome pest, the fire ant was becoming a major nuisance. Complaints about the fire ant mounted quickly. Fire ants invaded bales of hay, rendering them useless as feed for animals. Field workers, whose jobs required them to spend long hours near fire ant mounds, were frequently attacked and painfully stung. Young farm animals were sometimes killed when they strayed into ant-infested pastures. A chemical war against the fire ant was launched. It began on a small scale and then escalated. Cyanide, chlordane, dieldrin, heptachlor, kepone. Virtually every insecticide known to man was used against the fire ant. Yet the number of ants only increased. They continued to spread. In 1962, a newly discovered insecticide called Mirex offered new hope for the war against the ants. Large areas of land were covered with small pellets of bait containing the insecticide. Where other chemicals had failed, this one seemed to control the ants. A fleet of vintage B-17 bombers was converted to drop insecticide. Their single mission, to destroy the fire ant. The campaign has been called the Vietnam of entomology. It lasted for years, covered vast areas of land, and cost millions of dollars. When it was over, there were more fire ants than before. The fire ants have continued to multiply and spread, and scientists are searching frantically for a new weapon against them. At the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Fire Ant Control Lab, nearly 4,000 new insecticides have been carefully tested. So far, none has proved both safe and effective. A winged fire ant queen, ready for mating. The major problem in controlling the spread of fire ants lies in their method of reproduction. Mating takes place not on the ground, but high in the air. Unfertilized winged queens are produced in large numbers by every colony. At mating time, usually in the spring, they leave the colony for a nuptial flight. A hovering cloud of winged male ants waits in the sky high above them. The queens fly up to the males to be inseminated. After their aerial rendezvous, the fertile queens fly back to the ground. Each is programmed by nature to establish a new colony wherever she lands. The queen's new colony may be located hundreds of yards or even miles from her original mound. Within a month, a small underground colony has emerged around the queen. The first generation of workers tends the developing larvae with care, keeping them warm and alive. The queen herself receives constant attention. A group of specialized workers does nothing but groom and feed her. The only way the workers can identify her is by the chemical odor or pheromone which she exudes. For the rest of her life, the queen will do nothing but lay eggs, millions of them. Each developing egg is carefully guarded and cared for. Quickly, the emerging colony will multiply in size. Scientists have isolated the queen pheromone and are attempting to use it in their struggle to control the fire ant. When the pheromone is spread on a stick, workers mistake it for the queen. They react automatically and carry it into the colony. The pheromone odor may someday serve as a way to deliver new insecticides into the core of a fire ant mound. At present, however, it is only an experiment, which holds some promise for the future. Parasitic mites sometimes infest the bodies of fire ants. This fact has led scientists to search for other organisms that could control the ant population. So far, none has been found. Viewed through an electron microscope, the tiny fire ant takes on grotesque form. Nearly half of its head area is taken up by two sharp mandibles, each with 3 points to tear and bite. The fire ant's real wallop, however, comes from its venomous stinger, not its bite. Using a tiny syringe, Agriculture Department scientist Dr. Mike Glancy carefully milks venom from a dissected fire ant. The venom is unique in the animal world. It is a burning alkaloid chemical similar to the substances found in poisonous plants. The fire ant's venom makes an accidental sting a very painful experience. The ant first bites the skin with its mandibles, then it injects poison with the stinger. The result is a painful pustule which lasts several days. Dogs that play in fire ant areas are highly vulnerable. This puppy was savagely attacked. Farm animals grazing in infested pastures frequently receive numerous painful stings. This woman fell on a fire ant mound and was badly stung. In 1974, foraging fire ants entered the window of a convalescent home and stung this woman hundreds of times. She barely survived. As the fire ant has spread, it has taken a human toll. People have died from complications such as gangrene, which developed from fire ant stings. The elderly, the allergic, and people with circulatory problems are especially vulnerable to the venom. The list of victims will undoubtedly grow. The fire ant is multiplying and spreading at an incredible rate. Today, fire ants are sweeping westward and also to the north. They are moving through Texas and are expected eventually to reach California. If a fertilized queen should land aboard a cross-country truck or stow away in someone's camping gear, they could quickly infest vast new areas. Scientists have projected that the region as far northwest as Seattle, Washington is destined to be infested by fire ants. In the Northeast, even New York City may someday be plagued by the ant. Wherever fire ants spread, they will leave their mark on those unlucky enough to encounter them. The scientific name of the fire ant is Solenopsis invicta. It means the unconquered ant.
The struggle between man and insects is as old as man himself. We have rarely, if ever, gained the advantage. In the short time that fire ants have inhabited the United States, they have undergone evolutionary changes. They have quickly adapted themselves to better survive and exploit their environment. Special colonies have been found containing not one, but as many as 20,000 queens. It was recently discovered that some fire ants have adapted their bodies to store food for better survival in cold temperatures. 60 years ago, an entomologist wrote, "Since the world began, we have never exterminated, we probably shall never exterminate as much as one single insect species. If there ever was an example of an insect we cannot destroy, the fire ant is it."